Hello and happy Friday. Welcome to Believe in Purdue. I am Sam Springer, as always, joined by Grant Flora. Grant, it is a Friday. It is the end of the regular season.
Yeah, we're at the final weekend of regular season basketball, and there's kind of a lot that's going to happen this weekend. You got teams fighting for their final spots in the Big Ten tournament. You got
Yeah.
teams fighting for buys. Still, Big Ten championship looks to be Michigan State. Michigan trying to hang in there with a chance, but um, that loss to Maryland really kind of took them out of it.
Yeah, that and think of what you want. The Michigan has done a very good job this year with being much better than they were last year, but they just couldn't hold on against Maryland, and they're falling further behind. Now they have a sliver of hope. Um, actually, when we're recording this, it could be over. We're recording this a little early before the Michigan State game at Iowa, so therefore it may be a moot point by the time we actually take the air, Grant, because Michigan State beats Iowa. The Spartans have it by
Yeah,
themselves, but
yeah.
Michigan not able to hold on against and pull come through against Maryland. Kind of a big deal for the Boilermakers. That puts them into a three-way tie for third place in the Big Ten, with each team, Purdue holding the tiebreaker over Maryland, Maryland holding the tiebreaker over Wisconsin, and Wisconsin holding the tiebreaker over Purdue. You and I were talking about this. If that maintains, what is the outcome? We talked about it, and you looked it up. So I'll go ahead and let you share that.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. If the three teams stay tied, Purdue would actually get the 3 seed because after the head-to-head tiebreaker, because they wouldn't be able to break that tie since they all have head-to-heads over each other, it would go to their record against teams in descending order of Big Ten standings. So it would start with Michigan State. None of them have wins over Michigan State, so it would move to Michigan. Both Purdue and Maryland have wins over Michigan. Wisconsin does not. So then it would become between Purdue and Maryland. Purdue has the tiebreaker over Maryland. So Purdue actually gets the 3 seed if Maryland stays in that tie. If Maryland had lost to Michigan and had fallen out of that tie, then Purdue would lose a tiebreaker to Wisconsin. So if Purdue can beat Illinois today, then it actually helps them that Maryland stays in the tie.
Yeah, we. I mean, it's a difference of whether or not you play Michigan State in the semifinals or you play Michigan. If you take into consideration that the higher seeds advance, it's not likely that we're going to get all the top four seeds in the semifinals, but you never know, right? You
Well,
never
my
know.
my big thing also would be I would love not to have to play Maryland or Wisconsin in the quarterfinal, and that's probably what would happen if Purdue was the 4 seed. So to go to the 3, they're looking at maybe UCLA, who they played not too long ago, but I'd still rather
Mhm.
get matched up with them than like Maryland again, who's playing really good basketball right now.
And we'll be able to look at the bracket a lot better for Monday's show when we will have a finalized Big Ten tournament bracket, and we'll know who's what seed and everything. But what we're going to do for the first portion, real quick portion of the this show, before we jump into the Illinois preview, Grant, is we're going to look at Mike DeCourcy's Tuesday edition of his bracketology and kind of see where the Boilers line up. I know these are not set in stone; they're not actual matchups, but we can look and see how the potential matchups would play out if this were the bracket right now. So we're going to go ahead. I'm going to add that in, and we're looking at the bracket here that Purdue is in, and if you remember, Purdue was a 5 seed the last we looked at, and they because they were in the middle of a 4 game losing streak. Here they've bumped up a couple of big games. They've bumped up to a 4 seed in Mike DeCourcy's bracketology. This is still not a very easy bracket, though.
No, I mean you got like 3 blue bloods in there with Kansas, Kentucky, Duke. You've got Tennessee, who is just going to be really tough because remember what happened last year playing Purdue. Tennessee's never been to a Final Four,
Right.
and they're running it back this year with another really strong team. Like they're kind of going to see this as their year. They played a tough SEC schedule, so those top 4 seeds are all really strong. If I were Purdue, I would hope to try and maybe get to a region that the 1 seed is not Duke or Auburn, and maybe try and get a little bit easier of a bracket, but at the same time, they're also probably one of the lower 4 seeds at this point. So they still got to have some work to do to try and move their way up.
Well, and I don't know how likely it will be to move up and anymore. I mean, honestly, the 4-game losing streak did some damage, and that's not damning these guys. It's just it did some damage. You know, when the streak started, we looked at Mike's bracketology. They were a pretty high 2 seed. I mean, they might not have been the number 1 overall 2 seed, but they were in that area. They were the second, maybe the third, but they were a strong 2 seed. And I don't know that they can get back up to a 3. I just don't know unless they run the table in the Big Ten tournament along with beating Illinois today.
Yeah, if they made a run and then like a team like Kentucky and a team like, some of those other 3 seeds start to drop, like they lose their regular season game, they lose early in their conference tournament, it maybe gives them a shot. But I agree, there just isn't a whole lot left to help them move up, especially when they're not necessarily at the top of the rung of the 4 seeds. They're one of the newer ones. So obviously it depends on the selection committee. It's kind of surprising some of the seeds they come out with on Selection Sunday. So there's always a chance. But yeah, I agree. I think Purdue's looking at a solid 4, unless something wild goes down.
Well, and if you look at this bracket, the second round matchup against Marquette, it's a rematch from earlier this year where Marquette really just absolutely housed Purdue. But it was in Milwaukee. You tend to get that when you're on the road, a true road game against a team that's not a bad team at all, and that turns into potentially if you have an off shooting night, which Purdue didn't play that well to where they got kind of blown out. But honestly, the 5-12 matchup is an interesting one there, too, because Nebraska and Arkansas in an opening round game. Both of those teams are capable of beating good teams.
Yeah, if I were filling out my bracket and I had a second round matchup between Purdue and Marquette, I think I'd totally take Marquette because their personnel and the way they play is one that really disrupts Purdue, like we saw early in the season. But I think there's a chance a team, especially like Arkansas, who's really picking it up here at the end of the season and has a lot of talent, could knock off Marquette and then create an interesting second round matchup between Purdue and Arkansas. Obviously, it's very unlikely that we see this exact scenario come Selection Sunday. But
maybe
if it
Mike's
were
that good, Grant,
right, it's possible. I mean, there's still basketball to play, but no, I agree. We're looking at what's there right now, and we're gonna talk about it. So, if this were the bracket, and I wanted to take Purdue to the second weekend, I would probably take a team like Arkansas to the second round and have a Purdue-Arkansas matchup, which would be kind of fun, to be honest. Yeah. Coach Cal and those guys taking on Purdue.
Well, and you look, both of the play-in games are for opening round games that hold on or that consist of Power 4 teams. They're both in this bracket, and Oklahoma, who is it's crazy to think that Oklahoma, the last I saw, I think they were 5-11 or 12 in the conference, and they're still getting an at-large bid. But that tells you that the SEC is pretty tough because the Oklahoma had a really good record going into the conference season, and but Ohio State is the other team that Mike's got. So 2 of the play-in round games are Big Ten teams with in Mike's book with Nebraska and Ohio State, which then you and I have talked about this, but it brings up the question of where does he have IU then? And we'll look through this and look at the positioning of Big Ten teams, but where he has IU is an interesting thought because for the longest time they were on his first 4 out.
Yeah. IU, I think, is an 11 seed in the South. They actually have what they call a bye because they don't have to play in Dayton, according to Mike. And yeah, they're playing really good basketball. They're another team that I think if they got matched up with a 6 seed that maybe isn't playing great, like I don't think Mississippi State is playing great basketball right now. I could see Indiana getting through that first round. and then they would take on potentially Wisconsin, a Big Ten matchup in the second round. And whenever you play a conference opponent in the NCAA tournament, you never know what to expect.
No, there's a lot of Big Ten in this. In this South bracket. You've got Michigan at the 4, Wisconsin at the 3, IU at the 11, UCLA at the 7. There's a lot of Big Ten flavor in this this bracket. I think an intriguing matchup is that if IU were to beat Mississippi State, IU and Wisconsin. I really do think you and I were talking about this, and it hurts me to say this. IU's playing pretty decent basketball, even though they got beat by Oregon the other night. They're still playing some good basketball. They're still playing. I don't know if they're playing without pressure. Maybe that's what it is. But they are absolutely playing pretty decently to where they could beat a 6 seed, and it would be an upset. But with the way they're playing, it wouldn't be that big of an upset in my mind. And then Wisconsin's got to watch out because IU has a good. They cause matchup troubles, and that's the big thing. And Wisconsin knows this. They played and were pretty much blew out IU at Madison, but IU's a different team now since Woodson decided he wasn't coming back, and they kind of went there's nothing to lose. They're playing really good basketball right now.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, excuse me, Woodson is retiring, which means this team's future is really kind of up in the air. A lot of these players are likely to hit the portal or graduate because they're out of eligibility. Woodson's going to be gone. So they're kind of, I think, playing with that kind of end of the era type of motivation and mentality. And because they have the talent, I think, to play with anybody. Like, they can go into this tournament and anyone they're matched up with, they have the talent to play with.
Sure.
That makes them a team you really just don't want to see in March. And I think if they played Wisconsin, I would still probably take Wisconsin because they have a guy like John Tonje, and they've just been playing so well as of late. But it would be not a desirable matchup for Wisconsin at all in the second round if that were to be the case.
I would still take Wisconsin, but I wouldn't be shocked if IU won.
Yeah, I would totally agree with you. Yeah.
Well, let's look at the West bracket because it doesn't appear that there's one Big Ten team in this one, the 6 seed Oregon. Oregon getting a little bit of traction back after a big slide before, but they settle in at a 6 seed according to Mike DeCourcy. Not a bad draw for them. Drake is a good team, but one that Oregon should be able to win. And, looking, they would end up with a Texas Tech team more than likely in the second round. Pretty brutal matchup in the second round for Oregon. But, they're the only ones in this West right now for Mike DeCourcy.
Yeah. Oregon, I've been a little impressed with where they're at. It's still nice for them that they're getting a 6 seed because they really hit the wall hard in the middle of that Big Ten season. Yeah. So to be able to recover, still find a 6 seed, and that win over IU was a nice win because it was a big game for IU to try and solidify their bubble positioning. And then also just with the way they're playing, it was like, even though it was at Oregon, IU still had a chance to come in there and get a quality win, and Oregon was able to fend them off. And so I think that speaks a lot about where Oregon's at. They'll be interesting, too, to watch in that Big Ten tournament. They, I think, are looking to be in the 8-9 matchup of the Big Ten tournament right now. Mm-hmm. If they were to get out of that game and play Michigan State, it could be an interesting quarterfinal to kick off quarterfinal Friday.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's look at the last bracket here, and that's the Midwest. We've got Illinois, Maryland, and Michigan State in the Midwest bracket right now. Forecast Michigan State coming in at the 2 seed. Do you think there's any chance they get a 1?
Not at this point. I mean, even if the SEC teams were to lose, which actually Alabama just lost to, who was it? It was
Florida.
Yeah. So like that loss doesn't hurt them, but they still lost. They've lost enough that maybe they would drop down. I'm just not even sure Michigan State would be the team to move up because Florida got that win and they're on the 2 line as well.
Right.
So it's just I still think more than likely the SEC is going to end up with they have 2 1 seeds right now. Yeah, they would end up with 2, and Michigan State's going to just kind of stay at the 2 line. But
yes, Houston right now is sitting in there, but Florida is a 2 seed right now with that win over Alabama. Maybe those two flip flop.
yeah,
and
I could see that.
Florida jumps in as a 1 seed, and Alabama drops to a 2 seed. This bracket. Mike DeCourcy still has Illinois and UConn matching up in the first round. The last time, a couple weeks ago, we looked at it, it was an 8-9 matchup. It was UConn and Illinois. This looks like it's a possibility, and I tell you what, what a difference a year makes with those two matching up in the Elite Eight. It would be a first round 8-9 battle, and I really honestly don't know which way I would go if those two played each other.
Yeah, I think it would be probably one of, if not the best first round game that we would see, just because they're both, not only are they both talented, but they're now both playing much better than their seed lines.
Right.
And so it would feel, I think, more like a second weekend game like it was last year, but it would be in the first round with the winner having a chance to take on Alabama. I don't know which way I would go either. I kind of would lean toward UConn just because of Hurley and what they've done. But I could see either team winning that matchup, and it would just be a fun one to watch.
The nice matchup, or the good matchup, or the matchup I would look at would be Sweet 16, Michigan State and Iowa State. I think that would be a phenomenal game. Even though Iowa State's kind of floundered a little bit recently, I think that would be a great game between those two in the Sweet 16 for the right to go to the Elite Eight to play for the Final Four. So if this is any chance that these things come true, I think it's going to be a really, really fun March Madness to cover and to really dive into for each of the Big Ten teams. But Purdue, really, they've got some work to do. They still have one more Big Ten game. They have the Big Ten tournament. They don't put a lot of importance on the Big Ten tournament as to helping the seed line, but it's one of those, Grant, that they need to at least show up and not totally fold when they get to Indy. And even if they lose, if they play well, you can have a good outlook going into the NCAA.
Yeah, I mean, it's still a chance for them to get better. It's a chance to go after a championship, and they didn't get the Big Ten regular season like they were hoping to, and looked like they were going to have a shot to get around midway through. But this is a chance to kind of get a little bit of that rectified to go after a Big Ten tournament championship. And I think they're capable of doing it, especially if they were to get a 3 or 4 seed and get that double bye. So it'll be, I'm hoping it's a fun tournament. I hope they at least can make it to Saturday or Sunday and play in those later rounds. But yeah, it's still going to be just a fun opportunity to see what they can do.
Well, we'll go ahead and take a quick break for the audio podcast. Then when we come back on the other side with the remaining time, we're going to preview the Boilermakers game tonight at Champaign, or in Champaign, to take on the Illini to finish up the regular season and hopefully wrap up that 3 to 4 seed. I kind of got to looking. Is there a way they drop? We'll get to that on the other side. Well, you're listening to BLEAV in Purdue on the BLEAV in Lounge Sports Network. Okay, we are back. So what I was wondering is I was looking, Purdue is tied for third with Wisconsin and Maryland. If they lose, I think is probably the only way they drop out of that double bye, correct?
Yeah, they would have to lose. Maryland would win their last game. Then they would almost certainly be a 5 seed because even if Wisconsin lost.
Oh, yeah, because if they
lost, Wisconsin had the tiebreaker. Yeah. So that's why this is really a critical game, because if they win, there's a nice chance they get the 3 seed. If they lose, they're probably looking at a 5.
Yeah, that's and 8 p.m. tonight on Fox, Purdue at Illinois. Grant, I've talked about this on multiple shows about Illinois. They are so like a roller coaster. They'll play really well one game, next game they might not. They might play well 3 games in a row, and then the next 2 they play underwhelmingly. What does Purdue have to do to make sure that this Illinois team is the one that's playing underwhelmingly this time?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to have to be because Purdue forces it. I think Illinois is going to come out ready to play. You have to expect their best just because that's the
Right.
protocol anytime you play a basketball game, but also they're playing better. Illinois has had basically a week to prepare for this game. Their last game was Sunday at Michigan, where they blew out the Wolverines. Sometimes when you see a team play a really good game and get a big win like they did against Michigan, you'll see kind of a letdown game the next game. But I don't expect that because it's Purdue and because they've had 5 days to prepare. So Purdue has to really start to disrupt what Illinois is doing. I think it starts with Kasparis Jakachonis. It'll be a really good matchup to see Jakachonis and Smith in that point guard spot. I think if Smith can heat him up, and actually they might even put CJ Cox on Jakachonis just because they like to do that with their defense. But whoever it is has to pressure him and really take them out of running their offense smoothly.
Yeah.
But then you got guys like Will Riley. I think Will Riley could be a problem.
Yeah, he definitely could. But Jakachonis, he was mentioned. Chris Kramer mentioned that if we can get him in some foul trouble, he is prone to getting into some foul trouble. Very, very talented. I mean, he's averaging 15.4 points a game, I believe. Yeah, 15.4 points a game. So he's pretty good. He's hitting a third of his 3-point shots, so he's capable from shooting out there. He's a fantastic free throw shooter. Don't put him on the line. You know, force him into some shots, force him into bad shots, hurried shots, or try to get him to hack or get throw out an elbow because you're guarding him so close and he gets that shove. If you can get him into some foul trouble, that will bode well. Illinois, an interesting thing. I believe it was the first time since 1994. I think maybe I'm confusing the dates or the years. They are the first team in a really long time, let's say it this way, in a really long time to have 2 20-plus point road wins against top 25 teams. Michigan at the time was 18th, I think, or maybe 17th or something like that. But you also remember they went to Oregon and beat Oregon by 30 when Oregon was ranked 9th in the country.
Yeah, it just shows how scary this team is. Like,
yeah,
they're kind of like IU in the fact that they can play with anybody in the country. They got the talent and the ability. It's just they've been so inconsistent and just haven't. You could say they haven't quite gelled, just because again, Brad Underwood brought in a lot of transfers and new players. Like, I mean, I don't think anybody on this team was in the starting lineup from last year. They brought in Boswell from Arizona.
So. Yeah.
They got freshmen and Jakachonis and Riley. So like this is a completely new team, but they're starting to hit their stride a little bit, and it's going to be at Illinois. I mean, you remember what happened in Champaign last year when basically Purdue just hit so many daggers to finish that off, including Braden Smith's deep 3 with like 30-some seconds to go. I mean, that was a tough game, I think, for Illinois to lose because it also was the game Purdue clinched the outright Big Ten championship. So I think they have a lot that Illinois wants to rectify from last season. They see an opportunity. This is going to be a really tough game for Purdue. But again, it's really important that they come out and play well and try and get the win.
Let's remember what Illinois did. I believe it was after they came off the West Coast trip. I'll pull up the schedule while I'm describing this. They go to Oregon and they win 109. And I'm sorry, it was a week later. 109-77, right, against the 9th-ranked Oregon Duck team. They go and win at Washington. Then they win against Penn State. And then 9 days after, they throttle Oregon. USC comes into Champaign and wins 82-72. That's what I'm getting at there is, they can throttle somebody like Michigan by 20 at Chrysler. What are we seeing next Do they come home and get a week off to prepare and lay an egg like they did against USC? And this, I really like Eric Musselman, so I'm not ragging on USC necessarily because it's USC. They're just not playing good basketball at this point, And for them to say, we've got to win against Illinois, that to me proves that there's such a roller coaster of a team to where you really don't know what you're going to get. And I think the Boilers can do a lot to dictate which team they're getting by forcing early foul trouble, enforcing bad shots. If TKR is matched up against Will Riley, can he get Will Riley in some foul trouble? There are so many ifs and potential that this could be a real big battle, or it could be one of those games where it's like, wow, this is a little bit of a runaway, honestly.
It could be. It'll be interesting because, after that, or for that USC game that Illinois played, they had like 2 days in between that game and then the game against Penn State. So they didn't have as much time to prepare. They probably were a little bit more comfortable, maybe slightly overlooking USC because it was at home against a team that wasn't super high in the standings. That's not going to happen tonight against Purdue because it's Purdue and because they've had 5 days. But again, you still have an inconsistent team and they might just come out and just not play well. It'll be interesting in the post because Ivisic from Illinois, with his length and his skill, I mean, it's going to be tough for Purdue to guard him. And then he also could at least make life more difficult for Trey Kaufman-Renn. Trey Kaufman-Renn will probably still be able to score because he just finds ways to do that. But it still could cause some problems, force him to work harder. And then you got to watch foul trouble too. This Purdue team with their front court has been prone to that recently. And when you're playing with a guy like Ivisic, it might exploit that foul trouble tendency.
Illinois is scoring 83.6 points a game. That's a high total for somebody that, or for a team like they are. Purdue, I don't believe, I'm pulling up their stats while I'm talking. They've scored a lot of points lately. They really have. They average 78.2 points a game. So it's a relatively close average per game for each of the offenses. But Purdue has been playing a really good offensive set the past two games. They haven't broken down as much at the hoop. That's another thing that they need to keep solidifying going into Indianapolis next week, is making sure that their rim protection, even if it's still a liability, we can make it less of a liability.
Yeah, you protect that paint, especially against this Illinois team. They got guys that like to drive the ball. Again, we talked about Ivisic in the post. Like it's going to be hard to do. It's way easier said than done to protect the paint. But I agree. They have to start there. Have to start with taking care of the basketball. Even that first half against Rutgers, they had some pretty rough turnovers that helped the Rutgers, I think, stay in the game.
Their second half was really good.
Right. Hopefully the way they finish the game is the way they start the game against Illinois. That's kind of how it works sometimes. But again, it's still there. And I just want to see Purdue play a clean game where they can fix some of these mistakes, even if they still find a way to lose. The way they play and the way that they lose would still dictate where they're at.
Well, Illinois does average 11.5 turnovers per game, and Purdue 10.6. So Purdue's got the yearly average edge there. It's a matter of can they, and the Champaign crowd can be very raucous. Not as bad as Mackey in many eyes, but it can be disruptive. But I think honestly, the guys that we've got in our starting lineup, minus maybe CJ Cox, has experienced a lot of this already. And that helps CJ Cox at the same time, because while he might get a little rattled, they can come in and say, we're fine. They can get him through that. So it's going to be a fun game to watch tonight. A little nerve wracking to start out. And if the Boilers, do what we know that they're capable of doing, it might be an early night to where we're happy early, or it could be a nail biter all the way through.
Yeah. And, again, just a huge game, Purdue's toughest game since they went on the losing streak. So we're going to learn a lot about where this team is at. I think in this game tonight. Hopefully it goes well, but it's going to be interesting. It's going to tell us a lot about Purdue.
Well, I think you said a lot of it is they can still lose this game. And do we want them to have only a one bye? No, we would love for them to have the double bye, but they could lose this game and still look good doing it. Honestly, the Wisconsin game that they played, yeah, they had some breakdowns at the hoop where the defense was god awful at times, but they played a really good offensive game. So it took a lights out shooting night for Wisconsin to beat Purdue by 10. You shore up the defense at the hoop, and if Purdue still loses, but they play a good game, I think we're okay.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Well, enjoy the game tonight, Grant. Watch the Boilermakers, cheer them on, and we will have the entire Big Ten tournament bracket on Monday to look at and kind of analyze and see what key matchups we see happening during the week, and which teams may miss out, because there is a battle at the bottom to try to not be the team that loses out. So thank you so much for joining us on this Friday edition of BLEAV in Purdue. For Grant Flora, I'm Sam Sprunger. We'll see you on Monday.